There is a point in every man's life when the veil begins to fall. Not all at once, not in a blaze, but in the quiet erosion of his belief in love. That love was pure. That love would complete him. That somewhere, waiting beyond the ache of loneliness, was a woman whose presence would make sense of all his wounds. He grew up on that illusion, spoon-fed by stories, reinforced by songs, canonized in culture. The woman as redeemer, as home, as destiny. But Schopenhauer, the man who dared to strip the mask off love, saw through it all. To him, romance was not salvation, but seduction by nature itself, an evolutionary manipulation, not a spiritual connection. Beauty was not a blessing, but bait. What you call affection, he called instinct. What you name intimacy, he revealed as the will to life disguising itself in poetry. And that will-blind, relentless, unfeeling, does not care for your fulfillment. It does not care for your purpose. Whispers myths of love to drive men into bondage, to ensure that they sacrifice freedom on the altar of biology. He saw that woman, unable to dominate by force, mastered something far more powerful: suggestion, influence, emotional strategy. Not because she is cruel, but because nature made her that way, adaptive, cundive, tuned to the survival of her offspring. She does not conquer cities. She conquers the men who build them, through softness, not swords. It's through silence, not declarations. And the man, deceived by illusion, bends willingly. He offers his soul not to love, but to the fantasy of love. And in doing so, he forgets himself. Not in fire, but in comfort. Not in collapse, but in compromise. You think you're choosing her, but it is nature choosing through you. You think you're falling in love, but you're falling into a program older than thought. Look at history. Look at the men who lost their empires, their genius, their identity, not to war, not to failure, but to a woman they worshipped. The tragedy was not her power, it was his blindness. He mistook her presence for purpose, her beauty for meaning. He forgot that what glitters most often blinds. Schopenhauer did not speak from hatred, but from brutal clarity. A man does not lose himself in one moment. It happens in inches. First woman is not evil. She is instinct, survival refined into form. Her power lies not in domination, but in suggestion. In her ability to subtly steer the man's energy away from the metaphysical and toward the immediate toward her. During this dynamic, men become tools of nature's will. Builders of homes they no longer control. Providers of safety they can never fully receive themselves. Love, then, is not a celebration. It is a transaction dressed in sacred language. A man dreams of greatness, but once he kneels, once he aligns his purpose with a person rather than a principle, that dream begins to evaporate, gives up his solitude. But Schopenhauer would argue otherwise. He'd say that man has confused surrender for evolution, that he has abandoned his divine discontent, the very thing that makes him build, explore, and create. And in its place, he now holds a quiet sadness, the kind that doesn't scream, but lingers. The kind that doesn't destroy, but slowly disintegrates the architecture of his soul. And the world will applaud it. Call it stability. Call it maturity. But the fire knows the truth. He remembers who he was before he gave it all away. Then his silence, then his mission. He begins to orbit her moods, restructure his schedule, sacrifice his dreams not because she demands it, but because he believes that love is a trade of self for togetherness. But Schopenhauer saw through that lie. He believed that the man who surrenders his edge for emotional safety does not become noble, he becomes neutralized. The marriage, the promises, the shared goals, they become chains dressed as comfort. And when the enchantment wears off, what remains? Obligation, routine, a quiet regret that whispers, "This was not who you were meant to become." To Schopenhauer, and here lies the tragedy, he believes he is maturing, that giving up his fire is what makes him a good man. The brilliance of Schopenhauer wasn't in his bitterness, it was in his clarity. He didn't ask men to hate women, he asked them to see, to lift the veil of romance and confront the ancient forces moving beneath the surface. She cannot tell you why the man she once adored now feels hollow, only that something is gone. And that something is your center, your gravity. Because once you see through the lie, Once you feel the weight of your surrender and recognize it for what it is, not growth, but loss, you can begin again. Schopenhauer's challenge was never to turn cold, but to turn clear, to reclaim your edge, not through hate, but through remembrance, to become again what you were before the illusion. A man moved not by approval, but by inner command. Because when you rise from that place, not bitter, not dependent, but rooted, you no longer beg for love. You attract something far rarer. Respect. It's the still, silent purpose you once moved with before you were taught to submit it in exchange for affection. Schopenhauer believed this was not an act of love but of decay. Because when a man makes another person the reason for his existence, he forfeits the one thing that made him desirable in the first place, his independence from need, his immunity to manipulation, his refusal to kneel. Because what breaks a man is not love, it's the illusion of it. The belief that connection must cost him his crown, that in order to be loved, he must first be tamed. But the moment a man softens his edge to keep her, he begins to dissolve. Not because she asked him to, but because he no longer remembers how to stand alone. And in that loss of sovereignty, the magnetic force of his being begins to fade. She cannot tell you why she loses respect, only that it slips. But this isn't a death sentence. In fact, it is the beginning of awakening. Schopenhauer didn't write for comfort. He wrote for confrontation. And what he dared to confront was the myth that love completes a man. No, it consumes him if he is not already whole. What you call romance, he saw as submission to a script written by instinct, not by reason. Not withdrawal, not bitterness, but a return to selfhood, to solitude, to silence. Because it is there, in the stillness of your own being, that you begin to remember. You were not born to orbit. You were born to stand. To see through illusion, not be ruled by it. To recognize love not as salvation, but as a test. One that asks, will you abandon your soul for warmth? Or will you hold the flame of your mission so steady that nothing, not beauty, not loneliness, not longing can shake it? The script where you give up your purpose for her presence, your edge for her approval, your stillness for her storms, society will clap. It will tell you you've matured, that you've evolved, that this is what it means to be a man. But beneath those cheers, a quiet truth stirs. You are no longer sovereign. She, whether she knows it or not, will feel it. She will feel your need. Her nature cannot respect what needs her more than it leads itself. The man who believes a woman will bring him peace has already betrayed himself, because peace is not something given, it is something built. Alone, in silence, in fire. He saw that most men don't fall because of weakness. They fall because they handed over the architecture of their soul to someone else's emotional weather. They gave up command, and in return, received a leash wrapped in kisses. What you call compromise, he called sacrifice of essence.
So what is the answer?
The tragedy Schopenhauer saw wasn't that men loved, it was that they loved without vision. That they bowed before beauty without questioning the cost. That they let the glow of a woman's gaze blind them to the vanishing of their own reflection. Schopenhauer did not accuse, he revealed. He revealed that the forces of biology, instinct, and evolutionary cunning do not negotiate with the ideals of poetry. To offer yourself not as a servant of longing, but as a sovereign who needs no one to be whole. Only then can love be real. Only then can a woman look at you and see not a man hoping to be completed, but a man who cannot be shaken. That is what the world fears you will remember. That is what they tried to tame out of you. But it still burns, doesn't it? That quiet knowing that you were never meant to kneel. A man may write sonnets, sing oaths, bend knees in devotion, but nature listens not to his words, only to his essence. And the moment that essence is surrendered, the gravity that once drew her in begins to fade. She may not say it, she may not even understand it, but she feels it has become hers. And in becoming hers, he has ceased being his own. What begins as romance so often ends as erosion, not because she is cruel, but because he forgot his shape. The man who once walked with fire now whispers with apology. The man who once stood rooted now floats, waiting for her mood to tell him who he's allowed to be. This is not an indictment of women. To walk the Schopenhauer path is not to hate love, it is to love from center, not from hunger. There is a quiet moment, often just before the collapse, when a man senses it, that his life no longer belongs to him. He looks around at the comforts he's built, the warmth he's kept, and wonders why he still feels cold. It's because comfort without purpose is not peace, it is sedation. And many men, Schopenhauer believed, die long before their bodies do. And not from illness, not from war, but from 1,000 small compromises made in the name of harmony. They silence their instincts. They mute their mission. They trade their fire for affection, not realizing the affection was only ever drawn to the fire. You see, the world will praise you for becoming agreeable, but no one will admire you for it, not even the one you bent for. She may say she wants safety, softness, stability, but her soul, her deepest instinct, longs to orbit a man who is untouchable, not cruel, not distant, but sovereign. The man who cannot be moved by manipulation, who cannot be claimed by comfort. It's the man who walks away from false peace, even if it means walking alone. That man becomes myth. Not because he is perfect, but because he is whole. Schopenhauer did not write for the man who seeks approval. He wrote for the man who seeks clarity, and clarity is painful. It demands the death of illusions, the fairy tales you were taught about love, loyalty, and sacrifice. It forces you to see that the chains you wear were chosen, not forced. That every time you made yourself smaller to be loved, you buried something irreplaceable. But here's the truth. What she wants most isn't your sacrifice. It's your substance. It's a part of you that doesn't shift when she storms, that still stands when she tests, remains even when she leaves. The modern man, fed on fantasies of equality and emotional openness, now finds himself more confused than ever. He's been told that transparency is strength, that sharing his feelings, fears, and vulnerabilities will make him worthy of love. But what Schopenhauer saw, with ruthless precision, is that love built on exposure is love that cannot endure. Because a man who bleeds too easily, who reveals everything too quickly, becomes legible. And once he is fully legible, he is no longer mysterious, no longer magnetic. He is safe, and safety, to the feminine unconscious, is death to desire. This is the paradox no one dares to speak. A woman cannot surrender to a man she does not admire, and she cannot admire a man who cannot master himself. Your tears may earn her sympathy, but they will not earn her awe. Your honesty may touch her mind, but it will not ignite her body. Because what draws her deeper is not what you reveal, but what you hold. The silence you guard. The direction you never waver from. The self she cannot shape. It is the sovereign mystery that awakens something ancient in her primal trust, a longing to soften in the presence of immovable strength. So when you feel her pull away after you gave her everything, remember, it is not because you lacked love. It is because you lacked tension. You extinguished the polarity. You made yourself too available, too eager, too open. And in doing so, you became emotionally digestible, predictable, unthreatening. Schopenhauer would call this the fatal misstep of modern masculinity, not cruelty, not aggression, but submission through emotional exposure. The tragedy of the good man who is forgotten, while the untamed man is remembered, because she does not want to own you. She wants to feel you are untouchable. Schopenhauer never said love was impossible. He simply said it was dangerous, not because it destroys men by force, but because it seduces them into forgetting who they are, standing once again at the center of your own life and refusing to orbit anyone else. Schopenhauer's wisdom was not a call to isolation, but a call to awareness. A reminder that the man who cannot be alone will never be free. And the man who needs to be needed will always be vulnerable to manipulation. Freedom begins where illusion ends. And illusions die the moment you stop worshiping what is temporary and begin building what is eternal. The man who does not guard his solitude will trade it away for a fleeting sense of completion. Let it tear down the false idols you were taught to chase. Let it remind you that your purpose is not to be loved, is to become dangerous, become disciplined. Become the man who needs nothing, yet commands everything. And when you reach that silence, when your life speaks louder than your words, she will feel it. The world will feel it. And you will no longer have to chase anything, because what is real always finds its way to power. He will silence the voice inside him, the one that seeks truth, greatness, clarity, in exchange for approval, warmth, and routine. And once that fire is extinguished, it rarely returns. This is the slow death of the masculine soul. not by violence, but by softness, not by rejection, but by surrendering the very edge that made him alive. But there is another path, not one of hatred, withdrawal, or bitterness, but one of remembering, of reclaiming. So let this truth pierce you not to destroy you, but to awaken you.